you would get
Let's
everybody
get
settled in.
started. I was gonna put some like dance music on now.
Do it.
Did you start?
Yeah, I broadcasted. It says recording. Okay. Nobody's on yet. People are still getting their coffee. So my friend, a neighbor yesterday had one of her, call it like a block happy hour, or sorry, block birthday
So
pass by.
real quick, Angela, it's weird that nobody's on if you've got like 29 people registered. Zoom changed their policy this week so that any meetings set up this week, people are automatically put into a waiting room.
Robin McClure says she's here.
Yep. So we've got 8 people in so far. So
okay,
we just can't see them.
Okay, we just can't see them.
Yeah. So there, and if you pull up participants.
Gotcha.
Let's see, we've got a good group starting here.
Okay. I was gonna say.
I panicked for a second, y'all. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So we're working. Everyone can help.
It's too early for my heart rate to be this high.
It's all new for everybody. Don't worry about it. Everyone's good. No mistakes can be made. Well, welcome everybody. I don't think everybody can hear me. We're going to get started just here in a few minutes. Have a fresh cup of coffee, or me. My tea makes me very happy. Gretchen and I have already fluffed our hair, so you guys can see some
look fabulous.
Carrie, Craig, Greg, Mr. Seaback is here. Welcome. Oh, Louise, good to hear from you. Glad you guys are all here. I'm going to make sure that I send things to all panelists and attendees. We're going to get started just here in a minute, guys. So welcome. As I always say, grab your coffee, grab something to eat. Mr. Seaback is also drinking tea. Welcome, welcome. You'll get used to it, Craig. Gretchen, are you a Starbucks person?
I'm not.
No, okay.
I'm not a big Starbucks fan.
Harry, you guys go to Starbucks, don't you?
I do sometimes.
I'm just curious if they're still open. There's a Starbucks near us. I live near Fair Oaks Mall, and people, you know, they just in the drive-through. I can't believe how long the drive-through, but that was like a week ago, so I don't know if they're still open. Let's see. So how many people do we have? We got 14. I know we had like over 25 register. So Gretchen, I'm 8:33. Maybe people are still getting on here. I see some people still joining. Good. Mr. Dillon, welcome. Awesome. Carrie, do we have any, I'm gonna have people raise their hand later, but do we have any prospective members, or is everybody a member so far?
I think there's a couple non-members.
Okay, we'll give you guys a chance to chat and introduce yourselves later. Well, I want to be respectful of time, and Gretchen, I know you've got some open spots to answer questions later, but why don't we get started? Hey, just real quick, Carrie, I know that we used to have that networking time built into the registration page. Do people think that this starts a little bit later, or are we good if we started?
I'm sorry. Okay, repeat that. Networking time?
Yeah, we used to have networking time from like, you know, roughly 8:30, 8:45. So I just want to make sure that that's still not on the registration page.
I mean, if you want to,
I don't really want to wait.
Include that today, you can, or we can do that moving forward if people still want to.
I just see people
chat.
Yeah, we can figure that out. We might, we're looking at some different options. So for folks on the call, if you've got some ideas and thoughts, we're going to send a survey later. Would love to hear from you on what would make this better remotely and virtually for the participants. We do have some Q&A time later. We're talking about making it potentially a meeting versus a webinar so that we can see everybody. But our goal here is to, you know, get out quality content. So I think that I would like to get started. So, well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our second virtual business education series webinar. And we're thrilled to bring a very popular speaker, Gretchen Richards, with us today. We always like to go to our go-to speakers, and Gretchen certainly is that, and had a fabulous presentation ready for us for today, and then we just modified it to fit into what we're all going through today. So how to build influence in a virtual world. So welcome. On the next slide, I just wanted to introduce everybody to the program. Can you switch it, Karen? Next slide. I can't switch it. There you go. Welcome. So my name is Angela Zarello, and I am the chair of the Business Education Committee. And just to want to thank our sponsors really quickly to really help support our programming, the Fairfax County Economic Development Authority, who's the marketing arm for Fairfax County. So if you guys are not familiar with them, please reference their website, the EDA, and you can see a lot of presentations that they're doing today based on all the stuff going on with COVID. So I would highly recommend you checking them out. They help a lot of new businesses get into the area as well. Another sponsor is Miller Musmar CPAs. Joey's going to be doing a presentation in the coming weeks on helping us find some gold in our tax returns, but Miller Musmar is also a great series sponsor. So thank you to our sponsors. I know I can't hear you, but maybe you can hear me. I'll give them a round of applause. Thank you. We could go to the next slide. So again, if you guys aren't familiar with the business education, we meet the second and fourth Wednesday of each month. We do not let COVID-19 stop us. Our committee meets the first Friday, so we meet monthly. If you're interested in learning more about being a part of our Lean But Mean committee, let me know. And our theme this year is raising your game. So we've had different themes throughout the business education series. We've been existing for, I want to say closer to 10 years now. So we've been putting on some really great programming with some really great speakers over the last decade or so. And our goal is to bring content to the participants and use something in your business that day. It really is all about getting a couple of nuggets, not just listening to us, but really getting something to use in your business that day. So what I wanted to do, and this is during the live programming, I usually have people raise their hands if they're a prospective member. I like to know who's prospective because we talk about different ways to get engaged. So if you have a chance in the chat, and you guys, if you're familiar with Zoom or not, I welcome the opportunity in the chat to, particularly as a new member, maybe a renewing member or a prospective member, I want to acknowledge everyone. So I think this might be a good opportunity to just say, hey, I just renewed my membership. I'm excited to be part of the chamber, and just your name. And that'd be great. And company, I'd love to know who you are, and prospective members as well. If you're new to the chamber, this is a great opportunity to learn more about what we're doing. We usually host a monthly orientation where you can learn a little bit more about the chamber. And I know those guys are retooling the one that they do monthly. So please look out for that. Excited to continue with our series, Business Education, and we modified this one a little bit as well. We've got BEI coming in 2 weeks on the 22nd, 3 simple ways to minimize your online risks. And we're going to talk a little bit more about, mobile phone security, a little bit more about multi-factor authentication. So there's some, and look at the description online because it's really a descript on what we're going to be talking about relative to different ways to protect yourself out there, especially during this online. There's a lot of scammers, and we want to make sure that people are protecting themselves, particularly on their mobile devices. The chamber is continuing with their coffee and contracting series, but it's going digital. I'm not a government person, but CMMC level 1 apparently is very important. So join them on the 16th and check the website for times. And then also they're bringing a webinar on the 16th, Volunteers as a Nonprofit Magic. So this is a way to leverage volunteers in your nonprofit organizations. I read the description last night and it sounds very interesting for nonprofits, so check it out. I also just wanted to remind everybody that all committee and lead chair meetings have gone virtual. So check the website. Things are still happening, folks. Get involved, be engaged. I'm in a Wednesday lead share that meets today at 11:30. all the groups are great. So certainly think about visiting. And I think the, you know, the opportunity for people to continue to be engaged is a good one. So CMCC is the new cyber, David, thank you for telling me what this is the new cyber standard for Department of Defense work. It's very important for people who are selling to the government to be aware of. So go for that. All right, the only other thing I'm gonna say is that our chat box is open. So be nice in there. Remember, if you are new, renewing, or a prospective member, put your name in there. We want to know who you are. And I'm going to make sure that the link to the webinar survey is in there. We really, really want to hear from you. So when the presentation is done, we'd love for you to take just a couple minutes and fill that out. So I'll put it in there a couple of times. So I'll let Ms. Gretchen get started. She has a couple of rules with regards to engagement. So I will let her continue there. So Ms. Richards, off to you.
Thanks, Angela. I appreciate it.
Sure.
So I'm Gretchen Richards, and I'm excited to be here today. I'm happy the Chamber is forging ahead in the virtual world for their BESs. And the topic that I want to talk to you about today is influence. And I started studying influence a few years ago because, quite frankly, it was something that I struggled with. Coming out of school, I was a computer science major. And like most computer science majors, I was very logical, very goal-oriented, very much just wanted to achieve things. And I didn't spend the time or energy or give the importance to influence that I should have. And so I would be often just confused as to why, when I laid out a perfectly reasonable, sound, logical argument, that I couldn't win people over. And the reason is I just didn't understand the basics of influence, and I didn't have a deep enough understanding of my audience. And so I started studying influence, and that's what I want to share with you today. Some of the things that I've learned over the years that have helped me increase my ability to influence people. But before we start, I do want to talk about a couple logistical things. So I'm going to be presenting and not looking at the chat. Angela and Carrie will be monitoring the chat. I will stop 2 or 3 times to get questions. But normally I would take questions as I go, but in the virtual world, I'm going to just pause a couple times to do questions, and then we'll do a couple exercises at the same time. But before we get into the presentation, I do want everybody to sort of take a moment to think about one person who has been the most influential to them in your lives. So if you can, try to figure out who's really had the most impact on you. And then if you don't mind, I would like a few of you to share that story with us. And so the way we're going to make that work is we want you to raise your hand in Zoom. And if you don't know how to do that, you can click on participants at the bottom of your screen. You should have sort of a little control bar that's got different icons. One of them should be participant. If you click on that, it'll open a participant window, and there'll be a raise hand button. If you can't find that and you don't know how to make that work, the other way to do it is with a key sequence. And so for people on a Mac, you're going to want to hit Option key and Y at the same time. And if you're on a PC, it's Alt Y. So go ahead and start raising your hand if you want to share somebody who has been like highly influential in your life.
And real quick, Gretchen, I am watching for people raising their hands, and I can unmute them. So far,
Okay.
so far nobody, but let's just see.
Come on.
Come on, people.
I know it's early, but
at least I don't see anybody. I don't see anybody raising their hand. Let me see if they put it somewhere else. Carrie, do you see anybody, or is it just me? I don't see anybody.
Or you could put it in the chat.
Miss Ellen Jennings, Donna Vitale. How about I put Ellen on?
Perfect. How you doing, Ellen?
Miss Ellen, can you hear us?
Ellen is muted still.
I'm unmuting her. Give her a second. There we go. Unmute. There we go. Miss Ellen.
Good morning. That is so cool.
Hi, Ellen.
We try.
I'm going to mention my dad. My father was an engineer, and I grew up as a girl who, loved science and math, and technology wasn't really a thing, but I loved it. And he supported me all the time and encouraged me, and uh, encouraged me to attend engineering school, and just was a really big influence on my life. Unfortunately, he died way too young, about 20 years ago, but huge influence. And I don't know, did you want to hear anything more than that right now, Angela?
Well, so he really influenced you by being that person, right? By being the engineer and sort of role modeling.
Yes, and by being, very persistent and very intellectually curious, and in, being a hard worker, and in,
Okay.
Most of his behaviors, I would say.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Somebody else have their hand up?
Let's see. So you're just taking stories right now.
Just stories.
Okay. I did have a Miss Donna. Donna, are you still raising your hand? Can I let you speak? Where'd you go? She's hiding on me. All right, she raised her hand before, so I'm going to see if she still wants to talk.
Hello.
Hi.
I don't know that this is, a person that I have not known this person all my life, but I do consider them very inspirational. It was, I worked with a chief of staff for a GC a while ago, and I was just continually impressed with the way, we would constantly have, 4-alarm fires and whatever was going on. And she was able to just acknowledge, people, like the humanness and the emotion of people throughout it. And then very quickly still refocus everybody to get the work done and to just all pull in together. And it was really pivotal in how I view, difficult situations and what it takes to get through them in the workplace. So I do consider her very inspirational.
Great. That's a wonderful story. She has great leadership skills. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing. Do we have anybody else?
Not currently. Anybody else want to share who's been influential? What kind of stories you're looking for?
Those were perfect.
Gretchen?
Absolutely perfect stories.
Me personally, I've always been inspired by my family, right? Ooh, Louise. All right, Louise, I allow you to talk. Go ahead. Can we hear you? Unmute. Miss Yale, can you hear us? There we go.
Can you hear me?
You can now. Go ahead, Louise.
Wonderful. Well, I have a dynamic sister who is 12 years older than me. And what's wonderful about it is she was bashing through the glass ceiling from the start, I guess. So all my life, she's been around the next corner. A decade of difference in time always let her do things before I would get there. I still look to her after all these decades for guidance because she's terrifically smart. That's the first thing. She was the Dean of Education at Michigan State University. So this is a lady that knows how to get around. And she did it on her own. She was so strong that she would just make things happen. She knew she could find it in a book. She knew how to dig out answers and problem solve and so on. And so she was very pioneering in the way she went forward. And though she and I are quite different, it was her spirit, I think, and this entrepreneurial, although she was always an employee, her own strength of just making things happen, solving the problem, finding an answer, terrifically influential with other people besides me. But I've been very, very blessed to have this person who I look to her still because she's always figured it out, knows where to go. It's wonderfully influential in my life. Thanks.
Oh, that's a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Louise. I have another one from Craig Seaback. Oh, Craig,
Okay,
allow you.
take one more.
Yeah, one more. Okay. And I'm going to unmute Craig real quick. Oh, Craig, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear
Great.
me?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
Yep.
good morning, Craig.
Just a counterpoint to the last one. So my mother and father never went to college. My mother worked in the high school cafeteria where I went to high school. My dad worked for the government. Never went to college, but both of them emphasized education to the point where if we came home with a B, it was a national emergency. So just the fact that they recognized that education was so important in society, it really instilled in me and all my siblings the importance of that. When they didn't do that themselves, was a real lesson, I think, for all of us. And we've all tried to, to exceed their expectations for us. So.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. All right. Those are really great stories, and I think I'll illustrate some of the characteristics we're going to talk about of what makes people influential. So let's kind of dive in. So the first thing is let's talk about this concept of being influential, right? What does it really take to be influential, and what are the traits that people who are influencing us have? And so here is a quote from Brendan Burchard. And if you guys don't know him, he's a high performance coach that's actually pretty well known in the coaching circles. And he says people are influenced most by those that they trust, admire, and believe care for them. So think about that for a minute. Is that something that you guys, does that sound like true to you guys? Is that something that you think is accurate? I think most of you will say that you probably do think that that's accurate. And the beauty of that is if you believe this quote, it gives you the foundational pieces that you need to be influential to somebody else, right? So to be influential, you need to build trust, you need to build respect and admiration, and you need to treat people genuinely like you care for them. And I think you heard that in some of the stories that were just told. So, and especially today, in the current COVID-19 crises, when there's so much stress and so much uncertainty, this is really a great time to connect with people and to reach out to people and support them so that you can build that trust. You can show them that you care, and you can really, it's a great time to form some really long-lasting bonds, right? And crises can really like pull people together. So let's talk a little bit more about influence, what it is about and what it's not about. So a lot of people will use influence to try to manipulate people or to control people. There's lots of con artists that'll do that, but that's not what we're talking about today, right? What we're talking about today is real influence from an ethical standpoint. And when you do it from an ethical place, influence is about listening and understanding to other people. It's about being a role model, and it's about helping others. And I think that you saw some of that in all of the stories that the people shared, right? And so here are some quotes. Sometimes the most influential thing that you can do is listen, right? But listening to somebody, you show them you care about them, you care about what's going on with them, you care about their opinion. It builds that trust, it builds that liking. Influence is having people follow you because of what you represent. I think we heard a couple examples of that. And that's really being the role model and exhibiting behaviors that people want to aspire to. And then having influence is not just about elevating yourself, but about lifting others. And that's about, again, the caring, the trust, the support. So let's talk about some basics for influence. First, why is influence so important, and why are we taking the time to talk about it today? Well, it's a key factor in what people call emotional intelligence, which a lot of experts will tell you is how how good you are in emotional intelligence is like the #1 indicator in how successful you're going to be in life. And that's all aspects of life, how successful you're going to be financially, professionally, and in your personal life. And the reason is the emotional intelligence is going to impact your relationships, both professionally and personally. And emotional intelligence is really about your ability to connect with people and be able to influence them. And so it's directly going to impact your ability to lead and your ability to motivate and inspire. And it's going to impact your ability to do what I'm going to call ethical sales, which is where you're really trying to convince people to invest in whatever you're selling because it's truly a benefit to them. And then when it comes to being influential, to get better at it, you need to be intentional about how you're influencing and who you're influencing. So just as if I was talking to you today about building a personal brand, I would tell you that you already have a personal brand, whether you have spent time and effort thinking about your personal brand or building it or fostering it, it doesn't matter, you still have a personal brand. Well, the same thing is true with influencing people. Whether you've taken the time to think about how you're going to influence people or how you want to influence people, you're still going out in the world, you're interacting with people, and you're having an impact on them, and you're influencing them. They're observing your behaviors, and they're either appreciating those behaviors and want to role model it, or they don't appreciate the behaviors and they want to role model the opposite, right? But you're having some kind of impact on people. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, what kind of influence are we having, and is it the type of influence that we want to have? And then how can we be more intentional so that we can have better influence over people? So when it comes to influencing, there's a few tools that you can use to help you influence people. And of course, the tools for influencing are really the same tools for building connection, building likability, building trust. And in the research I've done, it really breaks down into sort of two different buckets. One bucket is a set of sort of human traits that help you get sort of a connection with somebody. And some of them can be sort of almost an instant connection. And it's based on basic human nature and common traits that are common in this culture. And so Robert Cialdini has a book called Influence. If you want to learn more about this, it's a really great book. It's a quick, easy read. And in it, he's got 6 principles of influence that reciprocate, mirror, consistency and commitment, social proof, authority, and scarcity. And we'll go over those. I'll give you a summary of those and show you how those are often used in like marketing and sales. A lot of people use it in their marketing copy because it's a good way to make a connection with a broad base of people who you don't necessarily already have a relationship with. But then we'll also look at how can you influence someone a little more deeply than that. And to do that, you really need to build these like strong relationships where you've put time and effort into them and you've built that trust, you've built that respect, and you've demonstrated the behaviors that you're trying to get other people to come forward with. Okay, so the first principle of influence is to reciprocate. And this is based on the fact that when people get something, they want to naturally give something back in return, right? So if somebody has gone out of the way to give you something, it makes you like that person, right? Because they've done something nice for you, they've been generous, and a lot of times people want to reciprocate because they want to be nice and they want to be generous back, or they want to just sort of keep everything balanced and they don't want to be too in debt to somebody, they want to give back. And so you'll see this used a lot in marketing and sales, where people give you a free gift, they'll give you free content or materials. You know, you can do a favor for somebody and then they're more likely to do a favor for you. There used to be a religious group called the Moonies that would hang out in airports and ask people for donations. And they found that if they gave people who were passing by a flower and a blessing before they asked for the donation, that they could get 2 to 3 times as many donations. And that's because of this reciprocate. Um, the next principle of influence is mirroring. And that really has to do with the fact that we like people who have similar values to us, people who appreciate the same things as us, people who look like us or act like us or have similar experiences and behaviors. That all sort of builds almost an instant similarity or connection with that person. And so some examples are people who have similar interests or interests or backgrounds. And some of the ways it's used is there's actually studies that say if you're interacting with somebody and you mirror their physical movements, like if they lean forward, if you lean forward, or if they cross their arms or legs, or you cross their arms and legs, that it actually builds a connection between you guys, and that people are more likely to be influenced by you if you have been mirroring their behaviors. And then sharing, whoops, sorry about that. Shared experiences is another way of sort of getting that instant connection. If you meet somebody and they say that they went to your college or they went to your high school, it kind of builds a little bit of a bond or connection, and you might have like a little bit of fondness for them, right? Because they may have walked down the same hallways that you did or had the same teachers that you did. And then common struggles is another way. And right now there's a huge common struggle, right? We're all going through the virus. And in many ways it's bringing people together. But other common struggles would be if two people find out that they both like lost a parent at an early age, that can create this sort of instant connection because they have that in similar. One of the other traits or influence principles is consistency and commitment. And this has to do with the fact that people basically want to think well of themselves. They want to think that they're trustworthy. They want to think that they're honest. They want to think that they live up to their commitments. And so they try to act that way, and they try to have that come across in their behaviors. And so different ways that these are used to influence people. For consistency, there's a lot of salespeople who will try to get people to say yes multiple times before asking them to buy something, because that does two things. One, it sets you up to be someone that person agrees with because they keep saying yes. And it also sets this consistency pattern that they're saying yes, they're saying yes, they're saying yes. And it's harder for them to turn and say no. And so you'll see this. They might start with very casual questions like, oh, it's a beautiful day, isn't it? And you say yes. And they say, oh, the world is really crazy. It's changed so much in the last couple of weeks. And you say yes. And then they might jump into some questions that have to do more about their product. And as you say yes and yes and yes, it builds this consistency that makes you more likely to say yes when they ask you to do whatever they're trying to influence you to do. And then for commitment, people want to live up to their commitments. And so if you can get someone to commit that they are something, and then you position it so that people with that something are likely to buy or likely to do something, then you're more likely to get them to commit to it. So an example of that would be in his book, Robert talks about a study that they did where they sent someone out to a neighborhood, and they did a survey and asked people if they supported using environmentally friendly products. And then 2 weeks later, a totally different person went to the same neighborhood to sell environmentally friendly products. And they found that the people in the neighborhoods where they did the survey first bought like twice as much product than if you went into the neighborhood and you just tried to sell the product without having done the survey first. So even if your commitment is to different people, it's a commitment that you've made sort of internally, and it carries forward. So social proof. Social proof has to do with the fact that we basically trust other people. And we trust their opinions, and we trust that if they like something, that we're probably going to like it too. And you see this in the virtual world all over the place. If people are going to buy a product, they'll often go to Amazon and look up what the reviews are. And if you see the product has like 4,000 one-star reviews versus 4,000 five-star reviews, it's definitely going to influence whether or not you're going to buy that product. And people want to be the best-selling this or the best-selling that. They want them to be the #1 product because people want to buy the #1 product. They don't want to buy the #2 product because they assume that the other people in the world knew what they were doing when they made it the #1 product, right? We've evolved to have to deal to live in tribes where we count and rely on other people, and so we rely on other people's opinions and thoughts, and you can leverage that. That's this sort of social proof in how you position things or how you sell things. And then authority is sort of a little bit of an aspect of social proof, but it's saying that you have expertise or power, or for some reason should be listened to above other people in the room. And we trust people who are experts or in power because, again, we think that they did something to earn it. And while that may not always be true, in the vast majority of cases, it's true. And so people use it by talking about their titles. They'll say something's most recommended by like doctors or people who have some kind of professional certification, industry experts, a leading person in this, that, or the other. And where you're seeing this in the virtual world is you're seeing people who are called influencers in the virtual world, or people who have like long list of followers, right? So we care about if you're on Twitter, how many followers do you have? And if you post something, how many people get to see it? It speaks to your breadth of influence. And if you have a lot of followers, we just automatically assume there's a reason that you should have a lot of followers. And so we'll give you more credibility in seeing that you have that large number. The 6th of his principles is scarcity. And scarcity is actually the one that doesn't really map back to trust, admiration, and caring as much as the other ones. This one instead is a little bit more about fear of missing out, especially missing out on something that other people really want. And that's why you'll see a lot of things about limited time offers, limited amount offers, or something that's exclusive, right? It's exclusive if you have to meet certain criteria to get in or somehow be privileged to get in. That kind of raises the value in people's minds. So scarcity is the last of the principles. So now I wanted to open it up to take questions on any of those slides. So for the questions, we're going to open up the chat room.
Yeah, chat's open, so feel
Okay.
free to throw it into the Q&A. Let's throw
Okay.
the Q&A a little bit. There's nothing in there. There's nothing in the chat right now on this. So
Okay.
if you could, Gretchen, repeat the name of the author for the book that you've been referencing.
Oh, Robert Cialdini, Ciadilini, I think.
Got more vowels than my name. Okay.
Yeah, Cialdini. Robert
okay.
Cialdini, and his book is just called Influence.
Great. No, I like it.
It's a great book. And like I said, it's a pretty easy read.
Yeah, no, there's no, you know, if you guys, just a kind of reminder, if you do have a question, certainly throw it into the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, and then we can address it at the end. But I don't see anything right now, Gretchen. Is there?
Okay, and nothing in the chat?
That people are, so Kevin Taylor just has a question. How did you change your behavior?
For these Robert Cialdini stuff, it's influenced some of my marketing copy and some of the ways that I handle sales conversations. And it's really helped me in those areas. But you know, it can also help you just in your day-to-day life. Like if you're trying to get somebody to do something, like back in the 90s, my sister, I have a 12-year-old enthusiastic sister as well. I mean, a sister who's 12 years older than me, not 12 years old in age. And back in the 90s, she called me and she's like, let's go to Prague. Let's go travel. And I had never really heard that much about Prague. And I was like, why Prague? It didn't make any sense to me. But then she told me that Prague was the #1 tourist destination for Europeans. And it was like the hot spot to go to. And I instantly changed my mind. I was like, okay, let's go. Let's go find out what the buzz is all about. Let's go find out why this is the #1 hotspot. And it was an amazing trip. If you've never been to Prague, it's phenomenal. It's absolutely beautiful. So you can use these, things, not just in sales and marketing, but just in your day-to-day life with people.
Gretchen, what did surprise you the most in studying this topic? Somebody was asking.
What surprised me the most was how much you have to sort of give to be able to influence, and how much it's really based on listening and understanding the other person. Because like I said, I was really coming from, an engineering nerd. I just need to convince you logically, right? Present a good logical argument, and that you'll see the beauty of that argument, and you'll just be won over. And that's not how it works at all, right? It's very emotional, and there's, you really have to work those relationships, and you really have to build the trust and the caring and the support to be able to be influential. So I thought people made decisions with their head, and they don't. They make them with the heart.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So any more questions, or should we move to?
There's no Q&A. Craig made a really good point by saying, some of the techniques like mirroring, or having people say yes before you jump into the pitch seems a bit salesy. So, it's not as natural.
It is. It can be salesy, right? And not all of these techniques are for everybody. And you definitely want to only use the ones that are authentic to you. And you only want to use them in ways that are ethical. You don't want to convince people to buy a product that they don't need, right? If you're doing ethical sales, you should really be convincing people to buy a product that they need, that maybe they're just holding back because of some, limiting belief or insecurity, and they just don't want to take that next step. Or they don't want to invest in themselves because they're not seeing that they're worthy enough to be invested in or something, right?
Right.
So, all of this really needs to be done very ethically, and anything that doesn't feel authentic, it's going to totally come across to the other person that it's not authentic, and it's not going to work. So if there's any technique or aspect that you're not comfortable with, don't use it.
Good point. Good point. Yeah, no, I think you can go on. I think being genuine, everyone knows that
People see through it so quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, good. Continue.
Okay, so a quick little exercise. If you guys could just grab a piece of paper and pen if you have it. If not, you can just sort of think about it. But to Angela's point at the beginning, we want you not just to sort of have the theory, but actually walk away from these programs with concrete things that you can take back to your workplace or home life and use. Here's a little exercise where I want you to identify at least one way that you can use one of these techniques to increase the influence in either work or personal life. So list a situation where you might want to influence somebody more, and then list out which of these techniques you might be able to use to do that, and then think about how you would apply the technique for that situation, right? And these human trait ones are really good for when you need to have influence with a broad set of people, or people that maybe you don't have as deep of a relationship with, or if it's people you do have a relationship with, if it's something not necessarily life altering, but like, which restaurant do we want to go to for dinner tonight, or where do we want to go on our trip, those types of things. So give it a couple minutes. We'll give you a couple minutes to think about that, or write out how you could use these. And then when you're done, if you want to raise your hand, that'll give us a good indication of how much time people need to fill this out. If we don't see a lot of hands raised, we'll end it in a few
Yeah, so we'll
minutes
take
anyway.
a couple minutes, guys, to certainly work on this. I've already done one in my head. Maybe refill your water bottle. We're kind of at that halfway point. I am going to encourage any kind of questions to be put into the Q&A as we go, and then we'll make sure Gretchen gets to answer them at the end, if not before. So
Okay.
do you want anyone to talk about a specific answer to this exercise, or did you want to move on?
If someone has one that they want to share, we could absolutely do that.
All right, so let's just, I don't have hold music, but we'll just wait a minute or two for everyone to work through this, and then raise your hand when you're done. I just want to say hi, Gretchen.
Hi, Angela. How are you?
Let you know there are people out here. I know it's
Yeah,
hard.
I like your Reston chamber background.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Although Carrie should show hers. Hers is very cool.
Yeah, hers is cool.
I want you to know we've got 28 people participating today, so I want to thank everybody for being here.
Wow, yeah, everybody showed up. That's nice.
Yeah, it is, and then some, so it's great.
Are you ready for my virtual background?
I am. Come on, there she
It
goes.
is so cool.
I love it. That is not an easy one to make. It's great.
No.
It was pretty easy, but I
Uh,
can show you.
And
All
just
right,
so
that's
you know, I do not see
You're-
any of our guests on here. I'm not going to call you out, but if you're a prospective member, I don't see you in the chat saying anything about your business. I'd love for you to introduce yourselves, just your name and company, so that we know. We promise we won't attack. We're virtual. We just want to know who you are. So Gretchen, it is, I think, 9:15.
okay.
9:07.
Keep going.
Yeah, I
Or-
think so. So does anyone want to raise your hand if anyone is interested in sharing their exercise? Let me just double check. I don't see anybody. I mean, personally, for me, you know, James and I try to grow our business through some virtual partners, some JVs. And I think it's important, you know, to show authority if you're going to be doing business on behalf of somebody or potentially with their clients. It's very, very important to show consistency in your business that you deliver, but also authority. People are going to associate themselves with people that can show authority, and that takes time. Right now, we're trying to look for some, we call them revenue strategies to get business today, but also build on for you know, for the future, because we're all going to come out of it, and we know we are. So
We'll definitely come out of it. Yeah. No, the authority is a big thing, right? Because people, their ears perk up. If you're like the #1 bestseller author, you know, they're going to listen to what you have to say. Or if you you know, are a PhD or have a medical degree, they're going to listen to your advice. You know, so building that authority platform is something that's really important in the virtual world, especially.
absolutely. So now this is great. I don't see anybody else raising their hand, so I think we can move
Okay,
on.
we'll move on. All right, so we talked about the human traits, and you know, while those are really good for some of the more sales marketing, none of the people who talked up front about the one person that really influenced them the most in their life referenced these human traits, right? So, you know, one of the first books I read when I was trying to study influence was Robert's book. And while I really liked it and I really appreciated all of the information in it and saw how it could apply to marketing and sales, I wanted something a little bit deeper. And so I you know, kept looking. I found a bunch of other materials, and I realized there was really the second way of building these strong relationships with individuals that take time, but these relationships that rely on trust, admiration, respect, and role modeling. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. So if you want to build these relationships and you want to build trust and admiration and show that you care, how do you do that? You do that by talking to people and really trying to understand them. What are their beliefs? What are their perspectives? What are their values? What's important to them? What are their struggles and challenges, right? You really want to basically get an understanding of what is it like to walk in their shoes. And then the other type of conversation that you want to have with people is that you want to have these kind of engaging conversations where you're really exchanging ideas with them, asking them what their thoughts are, and then being present, listen to understand, not to respond, and really hearing them out. So we're going to go in over those two types of conversations. So conversations to understand, it's really about empathy. And like I said, trying to figure out what is it like to walk in those person's shoes. And the best way to do this is to just ask questions. Asking questions is sort of a skill that doesn't get the attention that it used to, partly because of the virtual world that we live in and the way communications have changed to be sort of these quick, brief, short exchanges over text. But asking questions, asking sort of meaningful questions is really a great way to not only lead somebody in the conversation, but lead them in a way such that they're doing most of the talking and you're getting most of the information. And so you can ask questions like these. You know, why do you think that that happened? I mean, that's a great question if you want to figure out someone's thought process and their view of the world and how they think things work. You can ask, you know, what do you think about something, and then why? So like an example of that I use a lot is, you know, if you ask somebody, did you like a Star Wars movie? You know, most people will say they liked it, but some will say they didn't like it. But don't just end there. Ask them why they didn't like it. And some people might tell you, it was just too much fantasy. I don't have time for fantasy stuff. Other people might tell you that it's just too violent. They don't like going to movies where they're seeing people's arms and legs cut off with lightsabers. And other people might tell you that they don't believe in the Force, that it goes against their religious beliefs. And while all of those answers will tell you something about the Star Wars movie, what it's really telling you is something about that person. It's telling you what's important to that person, what their values are, what their priorities are. And that's what you want to be listening for, because that's what's going to give you a deep understanding of the person. And so think about some of these questions, right? How do you think that that went? Why do you, you know, why do you ask them, why do they say that? Or ask them to tell you more about something, or what has their experience been? These are all questions to help them sort of open up. And you can do this virtually. You can do this, you know, face-to-face. Obviously, face-to-face or over a video is preferable because you can see people's body language, and so much of communications is conveyed with body language. But, you know, good old-fashioned phone calls still work. You know, texting, email is a lower level because you can't get the inflections of the voice. But, you know, however you can, reach out to people and try to understand them. It shows them that you care about them. It shows them that you care about what they think and what their opinion is. And so it builds that trust. The other type of conversation is to engage people. And again, you want to lead the conversations with questions and keep the focus on them and get them talking. An example I have of this is at my first job when I was a software developer. One of my coworkers would come into my office and say, hey, can I run something by you? And he would then start to like map out his design for his next piece of software on my whiteboard. And then he would stop and pause and ask me and look at me for input. And I would help him flush out the design. I would come up with scenarios or variables that perhaps he hadn't thought of that he could then expand the design to incorporate. And then he would leave. And it would only have been a little 15-minute conversation. But in that 15-minute conversation, he would share with me his designs, which were always really good because he was very good. And I would leverage those in my code. So our code became more aligned and more consistent. I helped him flesh out his design more fully. And then if he was out sick, I could go into his code and pick it up really quickly and make any changes that I need to, because I understood how it was designed, how it was put together. And so we each benefited and learned from each other. The customer benefited because they got a better, more consistent product, and the company benefited because we could back each other up. And it was just this 15-minute conversation. And it created such a rapport and connection between the two of us. And I would then reciprocate, and I would go in and ask him about my designs. And it really built like a long-lasting relationship. And so, you know, here's some other questions. How would you approach this? How could this be improved? What do you think the risks are? All of these, again, you're looking for how is the person thinking. And in this engaging, you can also kind of co-create solutions with people. And that's also a very sort of satisfying thing that helps create that bond between people. So once you've sort of laid the foundation of building some of that trust and the respect by having all of these conversations of understanding and engaging, and by the way, if you're trying to build a relationship with someone who you don't potentially have a very good relationship now, and you go in and you start trying to have some of these understanding and engaging conversations, the people may not be very receptive to it initially, because you're sort of changing the way you're interacting with them, and they may be a little suspicious as to what's going on. But, you know, stick with it, keep trying, keep asking about them, keep showing that you genuinely care about them, and that you genuinely want to figure them out so that you can have a better relationship with them. And you'll see that people will eventually come around. As long as you're doing it authentically and genuinely, people will come around. So once you've done that, once you've gone through these steps, once you've built the rapport, once you have these kind of relationships where you can give feedback back and forth with people, now it's time to start influencing people. And then how do you do that? How do I sit down and have a conversation to influence somebody? Well, now I'm going to go back to Brendan Burchard. He has a book called High Performance Habits. And one of his 6 high performance habits is influence. And in the chapter on influence, he breaks down the ability to influence somebody in these 3 basic steps, which I find just brilliant, because it gives you a tool that you can put in your toolbox that you can pull out when you need to influence somebody and use. And while some of us might have done this intuitively, I personally didn't feel like it was a tool that I could just pull up when needed to help me influence people. So his 3 steps are: 1, give the person a new way to think about a situation, right? And then if you think about it, that's really what thought leadership is. You're leading the person's thought into a new direction, to look at something from either like a different perspective, a higher level, all sorts of different ways. And then you want to challenge the person to grow. And in doing that, you're really showing them what is in it for them if they take this new perspective and new way of thinking. So you want to show them how can they grow in character, which means how can they sort of be a better person? How can they grow in contribution, meaning how can they have more of an impact on the world? Or how can they grow in connection and have better relationships and better rapport with people? And then the most important step is that you have to role model the behavior. Because if you're not role modeling the behavior, then this just becomes manipulative. And people will think, well, you're just trying to get me to do something that you would never do if you were in my shoes. It has to be something that they believe that you would do if you were sitting in their position. So let's look at what those conversations would look like. So for influence, you're influencing somebody to do a new behavior or to change a behavior, right? You want to motivate and inspire them. But ways to start, and you want to have all these conversations be casual. The more casual they are, the more relaxed people are, the more open they are to listening to these new opinions, new ways of thinking of things. And so you want to say things like, you know, I like to think about it this way, or what would happen if we tried something different? you know, what would happen if we looked at it this way? How about a different approach? There's a bunch of different ways you sort of casually lead into that kind of conversation. One example of someone using this really, really well on me was in the past, I had a boss who wanted me to take on a task where I would have to work with this person who was well known as just being a very difficult person to deal with. And I didn't want to deal with him. And my boss called me in to talk to me about it. And I went into the office, like, just determined that there's no way he's going to talk me into taking this task. But he was a very influential person. And he, you know, brought me in and he basically gave me a new way of thinking about it and said, look, if you can master how to deal with this person, then everybody else that is a problem is going to be easy for you. And he kind of like redefined what some of the issues with the person was and showed me how that was true. And then, you know, so in that he's challenging me to grow, right? He's challenging me as a person to become better at dealing with difficult people. He's challenging me to have better connections with people who have difficult personalities. And then through all of this, he's pointing out to me how I can have more of an impact if this was a skill that I could truly master. And then he was a phenomenal influencer. And I had seen him really handle some very difficult people in meetings, in some very difficult, controversial, high conflict meetings, where he just handled it so smoothly and just managed people and the conversation to go just the way he wanted it to go. So I knew that this was an area that he really cared about. It was an area he had spent a lot of time and effort into developing. And it was something that I admired in him and wanted to be more like him in doing it. And so, believe it or not, I walked out of there saying that I would do it. And I remember walking out thinking, you know, how in God's earth did he convince me to sign up for this task? Because I was so set against doing it when I walked in there. And then when I read Brendan's book and the chapter on influence, it was actually the first thing I thought of. I thought, this is how he talked me into it. This is exactly the steps that he took. So those steps are very powerful, and you can definitely use them to get people to change their behavior or to sign up to do something. So, but again, the role modeling is key, absolutely key. So any questions on those slides? Angela, you want to?
You can hear me, right? I haven't seen any Q&A on those slides specifically.
Well, or the first slides.
It was a great story, Gretchen, with regards to
to my boss. Yeah,
that was good. No, just a comment. Another book that Louise Yale had recommended was The Coaching Habit by Michael Sanyar. I don't know if you heard it. I wrote it down. Say less, ask more, and change the way you lead forever. 6 excellent questions to build the trust we are talking about today. That's great. So another good resource. And that's in the chat, guys. So if you want to check that out.
I'm gonna check that out. That sounds like a great book.
Yeah, we will make sure that we'll stay on after this so that the chat is visible. And I know that those guys will have a copy of the chat. Yeah, so any other questions? Throw them in the Q&A, guys. I haven't seen anything yet, so I think you could move on.
Yeah. So, yeah. So someone had asked earlier about what's one of the things that surprised me, and so one of the things that surprised me is how much you can lead by just asking questions, right? So a lot about influence is not necessarily telling the other person what they should do or how they should do it, but it's kind of coaching, to this person's point about the coaching habit. And the way you coach them is you ask them the questions for them that they need to answer, for them to kind of take the mental steps to get to where they need to be to see it in a different light, right? And one of the things about giving somebody a different perspective and a new way to look at it, it's really hard to do that if you don't know what their current perspective is, right? And so that's part of the reason understanding them and understanding where they're coming from is so important. Like if I was trying to get people to sign up for a program to say, train to run a marathon, I need to know, where are you starting from? Are you starting from a couch potato who just found out like they have health issues and they need to like start exercising? Or are you someone who's running 6 miles regularly and just, you know, want to kick it up and do a marathon? Because the conversation I might have with you and how I have to change your perspective from where you are now to where you would need to be to sign up for something like that would be very different. So yeah, that understanding and asking questions, that how much you can lead by just asking questions is one of the things that really surprised me.
Great points, Gretchen. We're just heads up. We're about at 9:35, so
We're supposed to go to when?
about 10. I'd say a couple minutes before 10, just to make sure we got Q&A.
Okay.
Is that timeline still working for you?
Yeah, we might actually wrap up a little early.
Perfect. Yeah,
So,
then we can just do some Q&A, and I just have a couple of final announcements. Thanks.
okay. Okay, so here's the final kind of exercise. So again, we want to take these principles and see how we can kind of apply them to you know, our lives once we get out of here and go back to work or and our families. So I want you to identify a person who you want to have more influence over. And then if you don't have a strong, trusting connection with them, how can you build one? What kind of conversations can you have to build them? And I have this sort of understand, inform, engage, coordinate, influence, assess results down there because I have another course where I talk about employee engagement, where I talk about how managing people is different from leading people, and that when you're managing people, you're being kind of like my, you know, initial software developer self, where I'm just trying to get something done, right? So I'm informing people about what needs to be done, I'm coordinating with them about what needs to be done, and I'm assessing the results of what was done, right? But that's managing, that's not leading. When you're leading, you really want to inspire and motivate and influence people, right? And so then you're having conversations about that we just talked about, understanding, engaging, and influencing. And so I ask people, like, when you're going to inform, is there a way to understand better first so that you can tailor how you present the information so people can better understand it? Or if you're coordinating, is there a way that you can engage people so that you're maybe co-creating a little bit more than just telling them how the coordination is going to happen? And then when you're assessing results, especially if the results aren't necessarily what you desired, how can you have this influence to get them to look at something differently, to change their behavior so that you can get better results? So those are just sort of some thoughts, if you will, if you're struggling with how can you have some of these conversations to build more trust and connection. And then if you do have the trust and connection already, how can you structure that conversations to be more influential, right? How can you use those 3 steps to come up with something that will help you get them to be more influenced? So again, we'll give you a few minutes. If you have a piece of paper and pen and you can write down some of this, it's great. Otherwise, you can just sort of think through it. And we'll give you a few minutes. If you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to put them in the Q&A.
So far, we're, people can work on this. We don't have any other feedback. Is this another area, Gretchen, you might want to take somebody?
Yeah, if somebody has a story at the end, we would certainly listen to it. If somebody wants to talk about an insight that they have gotten or thought about a new way to handle something, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, one question that Ms. Donna Vitale posed is, it seems like these conversations rely on real-time two-way interactions. Many people transitioning into this current virtual environment emphasize just enough time to get it done meetings. I can kind of relate to that. Any ideas for creating real-time sharing environments that facilitate this kind of co-creating time?
Yeah, I mean, That's an excellent point, and I meant to mention that on the earlier slide. So just like my coworker used to just kind of drop by and say, hey, can I run something by you? You can still do that in the virtual world, right? I mean, you can text someone and say, hey, do you have a few minutes? I want to ask you about something. And then if they say yes, you could just set up a quick Zoom call. And if you don't, I mean, Zoom will give you free account, and you can do unlimited one-to-one meetings of any length with people. If you start getting 3 or more, then they limit it to 40 minutes. But you can either hop on a phone call with them if they have a minute and run the idea by them, or you can set up a quick Zoom call where you get to actually see them face to face. And then you could actually share whatever you're working on if need be, for them to like look at it or review it. But especially now that people are so isolated and so kind of locked up in their homes, this is really a great time to reach out to people. There's a lot of people who are feeling lonely, who are feeling stressed. There's a number of people who I know who are extroverts who have posted things saying how this is particularly difficult for them because they really get their energy from other people and they're not being able to be around other people. So, I mean, this is really a time when you can either make leaps and bounds in your relationships by going that extra mile and reaching out to people and showing them that you care and showing them that you're there to support them, or just the opposite can happen. This is a time when relationships can be devastated if people aren't being supported the way that they think that they should be. So this it's sort of one of the other techniques you can use is sort of like management by walking around, right? Where you just kind of like go drop in people's office and see what they're doing. You can do the same sort of thing virtually, right? Again, you can just give someone a quick phone call, text them and say, are you available? Can I talk? And then, the key there is to really take a temperature of how are they doing? Are they stressed? Are they frustrated? Are they just sort of overwhelmed? Right now, it's really hard for a lot of people to focus because of all of the uncertainties. A lot of people are making more mistakes than they normally make. People are taking longer to get stuff done because, of distractions and focus issues. And so, absolutely in the virtual world, you can reach out to people and have some of these conversations and chit chat. You could even take a coffee break with somebody. Both go get a cup of coffee and have a Zoom meeting for 15 minutes and chit chat about your weekend while you have your coffee, and then, go back to work. So there's all kinds of things that you can do to stay connected in this virtual world.
Oh, that's a great answer. And Donna, let us know if that answers your question. I think you touched a little bit on this, Gretchen. We've got another comment. So I'd like to welcome Michaela Syed. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but she's a marketing gal who works for a new oral surgery office in Reston. They're hitting their 1-year mark here at the end of April. And so she's excited to be a guest here. So I wanted to acknowledge her.
Congratulations, yeah.
So very excited. If you could name the doctor, Michaela, that would be great. But her question is motivation of her team. Teaching them these techniques. What advice do you have for someone who trains teams? Good question.
Deming, who was the consultant that really helped Japan become like the #1 quality producer after World War II, he has this great quote that says that people support what they create. And so if you're trying to motivate people, have them help you create whatever it is that you're trying to motivate them about, right? And that's a lot of those engaging kind of conversations where, you could, I don't have the specific example, but let's say you're trying to roll out a new process. Go ask the people, say, look, I'm trying to do this new thing. Here's why, here's what I'm looking to gain from it. Here's some of my thoughts about it. What do you think? What do you think some of the issues would be? What do you think would be a good way to handle it? What do you think about that? The boss I was referring to, who was so influential, He would go around to, I don't even know how many people. If he was going to reorg or put someone in a spot, he would go around and ask people. He's like, I'm thinking of doing this, and who do you think would be a good person for me to put in that? Not that he would necessarily take any of my opinions, but if he went and asked like 20 of us that, one, he made all 20 of us feel like we were somehow a confidant, that he was like asking us for our opinion about some, pretty big decision that he was going to make. But he was then getting a good feel. I mean, he was new to the company when he did this. And so he didn't know all the players. And so this was a great way for him to find out information about the candidates that he was thinking about, but it was also a great way for him to find out about us and how we saw other people and what we valued in other people and stuff. So, again, ask the people, get them involved. If you want people to be bought into something, get them involved in creation of it. I hope that helped. Did I answer her question or not?
I will ask her to
Okay.
come back. If not, I think it did. I think it was a great job. So we're at that 9:45-ish mark. If you want to continue, no other comments or Q&A at this point.
Okay. Well, I just have the wrap-up slide. So just to go over like the key takeaways, we're influenced most by those that we trust, admire, and care for us. And so if you want to be influential, you need to become that person that is trusted, admired, and that shows others that you care for them. We went over the different principles of influence. And then we talked about, for more impactful, longer term, deeper influence, how you need to really build those individual strong relationships. And you do that by understanding, engaging, and influencing. And we talked about the conversation when you want to influence somebody, that you be that thought leader and you give them a new way to think about it, and you challenge them to grow, highlighting how it benefits them, and then you role model the behavior. And the last thing that I have for you is a challenge for all of you guys. So when you get back to your desks, or once this meeting is over, look at your schedule for the next week and look at the different meetings and discussions that you have, and take a few minutes to think about each of those conversations and how you can be more influential in those conversations, right? How can you build more of a rapport? How can you show the person that you care about them? And if you think back to the beginning of this call, when I had people say who was most influential, you'll see all of those people really fell into these traits, right? So Ellen talked about her dad, who was an engineer, who really was a role model and did a lot of engineering type things that she then aspired to want to follow in his footsteps, right? Donna talked about her boss, who had that personal touch, who really could understand people, understand their emotions, deal with their emotions, and then get them refocused on doing the work, right? So you know that person was having these conversations. Louise talked about her sister, who again was a role model. She was smart, she was strong, she was entrepreneurish, she was just this go-getter, and she role modeled all these behaviors and how she wanted to follow in those footsteps and model her. And then Craig talked about his mom and dad, and even though they weren't educated, they put such value on education, and they challenged their kids to grow and pursue that. Right, and the role modeling there wasn't necessarily that they had done it, but that if they could be in their shoes and have those opportunities, that they knew that they would do it, right? And so, that's my wrap up. But do try to take the challenge, because you do want to take these concepts and you do want to apply them to your world going forward.
So if you guys have got any kind of final questions, we do have a few minutes here. I did put the webinar survey for this in the chat. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to copy and pasting that and getting that done. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but Kevin just posted, what is the best icebreakers for this line of thinking? I might have to make him live. Do you understand his question, Gretchen?
Sort of. So all these conversations, you don't want to have like a big formal conversation where people kind of put their guard up, right? So you don't want to like call somebody in to the office to, have a, engaging conversation with them, right? You want it to be casual, and you want it to be not people have their guard up, right? You want it to be kind of lighthearted, if you will. And so on all of the slides, and I can send out the slides to the attendees if you give me the list. On the understanding, engaging, influencing slides, I had like samples of how you could start sentences, right? So for the understanding, it was things like, well, what do you think about this? Or how do you think that went? Or, why do you think that happened? That's a really great question for getting people's insights into how people think. For the engaging, again, all of these things you sort of have to go first, right? It's kind of like respect. Building trust is sort of the same way. You have to go first. If you want someone to respect you, you need to be respectful to them. So to build trust, you have to trust the other person. You have to put yourself out there. You have to go to them. You have to ask them, what do you think? And like I said, it may not take the first time. But be persistent. Don't get discouraged if they look at you funny and it's like, why are you suddenly interacting with me in a completely, totally different way? If they do, you can state your intention. You can say, hey, look, I know we haven't always had the best relationship. I'd really like to work on that. I'd really like to fix it. I'd really like to better understand where you're coming from. And then start asking those questions, right? And that kind of can bring people's guard down as to, why are they here asking things in a different way? If you kind of state your positive intention up front, it can sometimes lower some of those resistance factors. But you just want to be casual and go through it. And on the influencing too, it's not like, oh, come in here, I want to influence you, right? It's like, hey, have you ever thought about it this way? Or especially if you're a boss to an employee, a lot of times the employee, just from where they are in their worldview, a lot of times they're not taking like a bigger picture view of something, because that's not their role. They're usually working on like one specific aspect of something. And so you just, can say, hey, what if we step back and look at this from like a bigger perspective? Or what if we step back and look at this from the customer perspective? Or, what if we step back and looked at it from the person who you're having a conflicts perspective? Like, do you think that they came into the situation stressed, or they, why do you think they acted badly? And you try to get people understanding and having that empathy for the other people. But the more casual that you can make it, the better. The more people will let their guards down and actually open up. I don't know if that answered Kevin's question or not.
I'll let him respond if it didn't. So Gretchen, I don't have anything else from any other folks. Feel free, guys, we're still here online, to throw in a question or a comment. Would love your feedback. Thank you for all the interaction. And Gretchen, this was, as always, fabulous. So thank you for a great presentation. I do appreciate and respect you saying that you would send this out to folks. So
sure.
I know that Carrie manages all that, and we'll make sure to get that list. So if you want to take away certain slides and put it in a PDF and send it, that would be great, or the whole presentation, whatever you're comfortable with. But there's a few in there I loved.
I'll put it in a PDF and send it out.
Okay. I did a little screen capture on a couple of those, because those are really good questions. Right, as a coach, it's kind of good to have some of those tools. I did also, guys, I just would love for you to copy and paste the survey and just kind of go in there and take a minute to update that or complete it, so that we can get some good feedback. I'm sure we got very positive feedback on this today, but we're also looking for topics for the future. And if you've got some information that you would like to present on, certainly the committee would love to review that. So submit your application. You'll see the comments, Gretchen. I don't know if you're in there or not, but thank you for all this. A lot of positive comments. What a great presentation.
Oh, good.
Great content, very thoughtful, influential. People are going to be reading all the books you recommended. Robin, thank you.
Well, I'm going to read the book that she recommended, The Coaching Habit. I'm going to grab that.
Yeah.
So.
If there's anything Louise does, it is keeping herself educated and
It's so important.
recommending. Yes, it was a great birthday present for me this year. A lovely book that I'm reading. But anyway,
Okay.
yeah.
Well,
So
thank you.
I'm gonna have the
Right.
acknowledge my partners at Reston Chamber. If Carrie or Alicia have anything to say, if there's no voice, Nancy Grand Prix, thank you.
Well,
She,
I wanted to thank you, Angela, and all the Reston Chamber people, Carrie and Alicia and everybody, for trudging forward and still having these, and you know, not letting the virus sort of take us down.
no, nothing. It's not stopping
Yeah,
us.
I think it's important, and I think it does give people a good chance to get together. And I appreciate everybody showing up. I don't know how many of you showed up in your pajamas, as Carrie has said you could, but hopefully you were comfortable and enjoyed the presentation.
Yeah, I don't know if I control. Let's see, Alicia. Let's see, does anyone want to say anything? Raise your hand. Reston Chambers not talking, so I hope.
I was just going to chime in. I know Angela, I know you've mentioned to fill out the survey, but please fill out the survey. That really helps us, especially during this time when we're figuring out things. Any input is welcomed, and we very much encourage it. So please fill out that survey. Can't stress enough.
Agreed. Okay. Well, I also put in the chat box a couple of, sorry, I'm just reading some of these here. Thank you. Very informative. Thank you, Mr. Madden, for your input.
Okay, I got just one closing thought.
Sure.
So, you know, this is a really stressful time for folks, and there's so many things that are just uncertain. We don't know when how bad things will get. We don't know when the economy is going to open back up again. And it can be so daunting that a lot of people can just sort of be stuck like a deer in headlights and just sort of stop and just wait to see what's going to happen. And that's just not a very influential position to take. And so, you know, if anyone is feeling like they are sort of stuck there, I know, like, and after the first couple of days, I felt I was sort of stuck there. You know, try to have that conversation with yourself, that realize that this is really a great opportunity and a time when all the outreach that you do, all the connection that you do is just going to have like orders of magnitude more impact than it normally would, because people just need to know that someone cares. People are isolated, they're alone, they're stressed. And the more you can do to reach out to people and connect to people right now, the better, and the more like really long-term impact that you're going to have. And I think you're seeing that from a lot of people. There's a lot of free webinars people are doing. Companies are giving away free remote access tools. They're giving away donations or funds or medical supplies. So you see people going out there and doing things that are going to give them a lot of goodwill going forward. And so I just encourage everybody to, you know, sort of take the longer term view and really think about your customers and think about how can you help your customers through this time frame? How can you help your employees through this time frame? How can you help your friends, your family, your coworkers, or whatever? And challenge yourself to not be that deer stuck in the headlights, kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, but be the person who is helping influence the situation and making it better.
Well, that's great. And Gretchen, if you've got some other, you know, webinar topics that you're going to be doing, you know, certainly let the chamber know. We'll put it on the calendar. I know James and I have a couple upcoming, and I encourage everybody that is delivering valuable content out there or anything free to help support the community and businesses to just let the chamber know. They are doing a fantastic job from a social media perspective, you know, calendar or the community calendar. So I highly recommend you leverage that. So I don't have anything else other than I look forward to seeing everybody here in exactly 2 weeks with our friends from BEI talking about 3 simple ways to minimize online risks. And that is also in the chat box if you want to just go ahead and register yourself for that. I think we're good to go. So,
okay,
Gretchen,
sounds good. And it's pretty much right on time. So good job, Angela.
Thank you. All right, guys, take care.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Cheers.